Begin today the Gemara on Daf Lamed Dalet Amud Beis, 5 lines up from the bottom of the Amud where it says Gufa. So the Gemara here brings back a Braise mentioned before, which was actually regarding the Korban Pesach. Let's see. Gufa Tanya, we learned in the Braise, Rabbi Yehuda Aimer. Rabbi Yehuda said, Kais Echad, one vessel of blood, Hayimimala Midam Hataruvis. They would fill from blood that was spilled on the floor at the time that they brought the Karbanas Pesach. Rashi here said before that on Erev Pesach there was so many Karbanas brought by all the Klal Yisrael that there was a big Bahala and there was blood that spilled on the floor. Not necessarily did it get sprayed on the Mizbeach. So if you fill from the blood on the floor in this one vessel and then you spray it on the Mizbeach, if blood of one of the Karbanas of Pesach spilled, so nimtza shumachshire. Now that he pours it on the mizbeach, which is the halacha by the Korban Pesach, it has to actually be poured on the mizbeach. Then you're machshir that carbon. That's what Rabbi Yehuda said. Let's see. It's all coming here in the Gemara. Okay. Let's see. Amr Rabbi Yehuda.
When did they spray it?
Korban Pesach, right? Like every carbon after the shechita.
They collected this after. After all the halal was said.
During the whatever.
It doesn't say.
Yeah, it doesn't say exactly when, but during the time. Yeah.
Before they ate, in other words.
Amrullah. So now the Chachamim say to Rabbi Yehuda, "V'haloi lo niskabel bekeli." The blood was not received in a vessel. So blood that spills on the floor and wasn't received in a vessel, we learned before, that passes the whole carbon. You can't pick it up from the floor. So now this is what it says. The Chachamim asked Rabbi Yehuda. Now the Gemara interjects and asks, Mina Yadi. How Chachamim asking this with certainty that the blood that's on the floor was never received in a vessel? Elo, therefore the Gemara says what they were asking is Shema leiniskabel bekeli. Possibly the blood that's on the floor was not received in a vessel.
Oh, perhaps.
So therefore comes out that you're spraying apostle blood. That was their question. Amalahen, Rabbi Yehuda answers, Af ani lo yamarti elo kishniskabel bekeli. This that I said, that you can gather the blood from the ground, is only if it was previously received in a vessel, and then it's spilled, then they spray it on the Mizbeach, and they gather it from the ground. So the Gemara says, but v'hu gufei mino yoda. How did Rabbi Yehuda know that the blood from the ground was received in a vessel? Answers the Gemara, Kainim zrizenheim. The Kainim are very they have an alacrity. They do things in their job and they're careful. And therefore they definitely, by the shechita, receive the blood in a vessel. But then what happens? Va'avden hai. For this reason itself, because they do things with azrizos, so they are rushing, and therefore what happens is, the blood in the vessel spills. And therefore Rabbi Yehuda says, it's safe to assume the blood on the floor, the Kainim didn't just allow the blood to go on straight into the floor. They're careful with what they do, and therefore they receive the blood. But because there's so much happening and they work quickly, it's possible it would spill to the ground.
All of it?
Some of the Karbanos.
What's the difference of some of it? The point is to get a zik on the Mizbeach.
Yeah, exactly.
What's the difference of some spill on the floor?
Because
one carbon, the whole blood.
Right. If the whole...
As I mentioned, the whole thing
yeah,
spilled out?
of one carbon. It's possible from one carbon.
Wow. There was thousands of carbonas.
Right.
Correct, but if there's reason, it doesn't mean the whole thing spilled out from the Kainim.
In fact, the Gemara, there's another problem here. The haloi dam hatamtzis mu'urav bai. So we learned before regarding the blood that has to be sprayed in the mizbeach. It has to be dam hanefesh, that blood that the animal is dying. The nefesh comes out from that blood, not the dam hatamtzis, which is after that. So the question is, dam hatamtzis mu'urav bai. There's blood that's later on that's not qualified to be used to spray in the mizbeach. That's mixed into the blood that's in the ground. So how could you spray on the mizbeach mixed with pasal blood? Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda Taimei. Rabbi Yehuda follows his opinion elsewhere. The Omar, Rabbi Yehuda says, Dam hatamtzis koridam. This blood, it's called dam hatamtzis, even though it's not the blood that the nefesh comes out with it. It also qualifies to be like other blood. The Tanya, as we see this in a Braise, Rabbi Yehuda said this regarding the iser of drinking blood. Dam hatamtzis ba'azhara. So the Tanakhama says the dam hatamtzis over here. There's only a lav not to drink it, but there's no kares. Rabbi Yehuda says bekares that the same halacha like the dam hanefesh applies to the dam hatamtzis. That there's a chiyuv of kares. The Gemara there in Krisus brings the source for this. It says, I think in the pasuk kol dam. There's a lashon that Rabbi Yehuda learns out that it includes all blood, including the dam hatamtzis as well. So the Gemara is assuming that just like Rabbi Yehuda says this regarding the Isser of drinking blood, that Dam HaTamtzis is the same as Dam HaNefesh, the same is here regarding the spraying of the blood on the Mizbeach, that the Dam HaTamtzis and the Dam HaNefesh is the same thing. But that you can't compare, because Rabbi Yehuda will agree when it comes to spraying the blood on the Mizbeach for the atonement, that the Dam HaTamtzis will not be mechaper like the Dam HaNefesh. Shenemar, because the pasuk here says regarding the blood that has to be sprayed on the Mizbeach, the accurate lashon of the pasuk is Ki Adam hu banefesh yechaper. That's the lashon of the pasuk. So from this you see it says that the dam is where the nefesh of the animal comes out with it. That's what is the kapara when you spray it on the Mizbeach. Dam sha nefesh yoytze by kari dam, she'era nefesh yoytze by and kari dam. That blood that the life of the animal comes out with it is what the blood is qualifies as blood to be sprayed on the Mizbeach. So the question remains, how could Rabbi Yehuda say that you're gathering the blood from the floor if there could be puzzle blood mixed in with it from the Dam HaTamtzis? So Ella, therefore the Gemara answers a different answer, which answers also the first question. We're not concerned about puzzle of blood being mixed in here. Why not? Because Rabbi Yehuda l'taimei, Rabbi Yehuda follows his opinion elsewhere. The Omar ein dam mevatel dam. Blood that's mixed with other blood, the meaning you have kosher blood, qualified to be sprayed on the Mizbeach, and you have puzzle blood, not qualified. When it mixes together, the kosher blood does not become bottled with the puzzle blood that now it can't be sprayed on the Mizbeach. This halacha of ein dam mevatel dam, as Rashi here brings, this is not a unique halacha regarding blood. This is the general concept that Rabbi Yehuda holds, that min b'minai, when you have two things that are the same kind, together, they're not bottled. So over here as well, the kosher blood is not bottled, so you could still spray it on the Mizbeach.
Even though it's Dam HaTamtzis.
Right, yeah, Dam HaTamtzis, or even blood that's spilled straight to the floor. Doesn't matter, because you know there's also kosher blood there, and it doesn't become bottled, you can spray it on the Mizbeach. Amalem Rabbi Yehuda, now the Gemara continues. The assumption is there's also kosher blood over here. And the Gemara continues this brayse where Rabbi Yehuda asks on the Chachamim that say that we do not pick up from the blood of the floor to spray on the Mizbeach. So Amalem Rabbi Yehuda says to the Chachamim, Lidivreichem, according to your opinion that you can't use the blood from the floor, Lama poikike ha'azara. Why is it that the Mishnah says in Psachim that on Erev Pesach, the Azara, there was a hole at the end of the Azara where the blood flowed out into Nachal Kidrain, but then by Erev Pesach, by the time they brought the Korban Pesach, they would clog it, so the blood remained in the Azara. Why did they do this? According to Rabbi Yehuda, so that they could pick up the blood from the floor and spray in the Mizbeach. But according to the Chachamim, that they're not doing that, so what was the reason? Amrullah, so the Chachamim answered, because Shvachu lebnei Aaron, this is the praise of the Kainim, bnei Aaron, sheyahalchu ad akuviseyim bedam, that they're walking in blood, up to their knees in blood, that doing the Aveda in such a circumstance, that shows their dedication to the Aveda. That's what it says in some of Farshim, that this is an expression of their dedication, that they do the Aveda even at this point when they have blood up to their knees. That's the reason why they did not allow the blood to go out.
They were saying it's their knees?
Yeah, that's what it is. It's pretty tall, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Fragt the Gemara, V'ho dam have chatzitza. So now the Gemara asks, but there's a problem with this. If they're walking in blood, shouldn't that be a chatzitza? The Kayin has to stand with his 2 feet on the ground. As we learned earlier in the Masechta, if a Kayin stands on a vessel, not on the floor of the Azara, it's a chatzitza. And says the Gemara, lachu. No, this is blood, it's liquid. V'lo yav a chatzitza. And therefore that's not considered to be a chatzitza. The Tnan, or the Tanya, we learned in Abraisa, Hadam, V'hadyoi, blood or ink, V'advash, honey, V'acholov, milk, Yeveshin, if it's dry and the kind is standing on that, Chaytzitzin, that is a chatzitza. However, Lachin, if it's moist, ain't Chaytzitzin, it's not a chatzitza. So therefore the blood is not an issue of chatzitza. But there's another issue. Their clothing is becoming dirty from the blood. So what's the problem with this? With Nan or Tanya, it says in the Braise, if the clothing that the Kayin is wearing is dirty, and he serves this way, psula, the Aveda is possible. We had this earlier in the Masechta. So over here, it's definitely getting dirty with the blood. So how is the Aveda going to qualify? So if you'll say that the midlaluhu, what they had to do is they had to raise their clothing and walk this way. But that doesn't work either, because we also learned earlier in the Masechta about Tanya, it says in the Braise, Midoi. In the Pasuk where it speaks about the Kayin wearing, it says, V'lava shakayin midoi bad. What does midoi mean? To the size. Kimidosai has to be the size of the Kayin, Shelo yechzar, v'shelo yaser. Shouldn't be too short, and it shouldn't be too long. So if the Kayin is lifting up his garments, so then it is the garments that he's wearing now is too short. So they can't lift it up. You have to leave it the length of his body to the ground. So how are they doing the Aveda in the blood? And it says the Gemara, B'hilochas Evarim lekevesh. The time that it says that they were walking in the blood, and this is the praise of the Bnei Aaron, that they were dedicated to their Aveda, that wasn't by the main Aveda, by shechting or by bringing the blood to spray in the Mizbeach. It was by the later on, when they brought the pieces of the Korban Pesach that had to be burnt on the Mizbeach, the lav Avedahi. That is not an Aveda that you have to have the begodim wearing it properly and not dirty. Bringing the pieces of the carbon to the Mizbeach is not an Aveda. But Vatanya, we learned in Abraise, it says in the Pasuk that the Kohen is makar everything on the Mizbeach. What does this mean? He's bringing the pieces of the carbon to the wrap that has to be burnt on the Mizbeach. So if so, we clearly see that it says the Kohen. This is part of the Aveda the Kohen has to do to bring it to the ramp to be burnt on the Mizbeach. Elo says the Gemara, Bohilochas eitzim lamarache. It means that when they had to deliver more wood for the fire on the Mizbeach, and then they walked in this blood, the lav Avedahi, bringing the wood, that's not an Aveda. Okay, but the question is, so the blood though was there. There was other things to be done as well. So when they were doing the Aveda, like bringing the pieces to the Mizbeach or the blood, whatever had to be done, which is an Aveda, how do they walk if it's full of blood? And says the Gemara, Ozli a'itztavi. They would walk on a bench. Now this bench doesn't mean a wooden bench, but it actually means stones that were raised, that they were able to walk on these stones to go to the Mizbeach without walking in the blood. And the reason why this is not a chatzitze is because it was built into the floor. It was stones that were cemented or built into the floor itself, so it's like part of the floor of the Azara, and they would walk on these stones in order to get to the Mizbeach without getting dirty and without having to raise their big day kohuna. That's the story of the Korban Pesach and Erev Pesach.
What's the story?
The floor wasn't flat. In other words,
It was. They had areas, pathways. They had.
when you
apparently.
learn for the Beis Midrash, it never came to stand.
Okay, so here, this is what it says. It's to be. A person shechts a carbon. Lechoil dova she'ein darke lechol. And now he's shechting it with a machshave. This is what our Masechta or these prakim here are speaking about, to eat it out of its place or out of its time. And he's shechting it when? Lechol dova she'ein darke lechol. He's thinking that he's going to eat a part of the carbon which is not made for eating. It's made to be burnt on the Mizbeach. That's what he's going to eat out of its time or place. Or lahakter, dovashen darke lahakter. Or he's going to burn on the Mizbeach something that's not made to burn on the Mizbeach, it's made to eat, and that's what he's thinking to burn out of its time or place. Kosher. So the carbon is kosher. This machshava is not pasul. It has to be for what's fit to eat by the person or for what's fit to eat by the Mizbeach. We learned from the Pasuk, the Gemara brought, it says by the pigul, in the Pasuk, v'im he'ochel ya'ochel, there's two achilas, the achila of the Adam or the achila of the Mizbeach, but it has to be in the derech achila for a person or the derech achila for the Mizbeach. However, Rabbi Eliezer Paisal, Rabbi Eliezer says that it's not necessary for it to be the derech. Even if it's the achilas Adam, that he thinks that the Mizbeach is going to be burnt out of its time or place, and the same in the reverse, it'll also passel. Lechol dova shedarke lechol. If his machshava is that he's going to eat something that it is the derech to eat, or to burn something that it is the derech to burn on the Mizbeach. But pacha is mekazayis. His machshava is regarding an amount less of a kazayis that it'll be done out of its time or place. So in such a case, kosher, this will be kosher. Since the pasuk uses the term achila, so achila in the Torah always means a kazayis. Now, lechol kechatzi zayis or lahakte kechatzi zayis, if his machshava is that a half a kazayis of eating will be out of its time, and a half a kazayis of burning on the Mizbech will be out of its time, kosher. So that will be kosher, because she'ein, achile, v'haktare, mitzdarfen. These two, the achile and haktare, it's two different things. They do not combine to be a kazayis to passel the carbon. He's shechting the carbon, and what is his machshava? Lechel. He's going to eat out of the time or out of the place. Kazayis mina from the hide of the animal, which is not edible at all. Now that's the hide, and then the rest of the things the Mishnah is going to count there are things that are sort of edible, but it's not at all the derech to eat them. From sauce that comes out of when you cook it. Umenakipa, which is also when you spice the meat, and there's the spicing that's left over with some little pieces of meat, sort of the remnants of the food. It's also not the derech to eat this. Umina olol, and the olol, which is a certain tendon that's in the neck of the animal, which is too hard and it's not really right to eat. Umina tzalmais, or to eat from the bones. Umina gidin, or b'chlal, other tendons. Umina karnayim, from the horns. Umina tlafayim, from the hooves. And chutzlas manoi, chutzlas b'kaimoi, all of these. His machshava was to eat it out of its time or place, kosher. It's going to be kosher since it's not the derech to eat these things. This machshava does not make it pigul. And ve'ein chayav and alein, so the carbon is kosher, and you won't be chayiv if you eat from this carbon itself, mishum pigul. That means you won't be chayiv kares. If you eat from the carbon itself, not for the isser of pigul, the noisa, or if you eat any of these parts out of its time, a lot of time to eat, so the kares of noisa does not apply, or v'tamei. A person that's tamei and eats from it will also not be chayiv kares.
What's this different than the ratio?
It's
Back to lechel.
first it's talking about again.
The ratio says.
Over there, it's talking about a person that was thinking to eat something that's usually burnt on the mizbeach. Could be it's edible, completely broiled to eat, but it's made to burn on the mizbeach. Here, it's talking about parts of the animal that are not burnt on the mizbeach, but it's also not edible, and therefore it will not become the pigul, and the carbon remains kosher. But it is a similar din. You're right.
So, malach, if it's edible and it's not.
Okay, I hear. Okay, I hear. Hasheichet es hamugdashin. If someone shechts a carbon, and this term mugdashin, Rashi here says actually that whenever it uses in the Mishnah the term of mugdashin, it means a carbon which is an akeva. So he's thinking like this: lechol shlil, he's going to eat from this behemah the fetus oishilya, or the placenta b'chutz, out of its place. Loy pigel. It does not passel the carbon because it's not considered to be part of the body of the animal. When you do melike for a tairin, which is the kind of birds that were brought as a carbon, and his machshava was that he's going to eat lechol beitzeyen, the egg of this bird, bachutz, out of its place, loy pigel. That also doesn't pass the carbon because the egg is also not considered to be part of the body of the bird. Cholav mugdashin, if it's milk from the animal that he was makdish for the carbon, that's what he's going to eat out of its place. Ubeitzei tairin, and the eggs from the birds, ein chayav nalei mishum pigul. If you had any machshava where the animal did become pigul, or the bird did become pigul, but if you're then eating from this pigul animal or pigul bird, you're eating from it the eggs, or you're drinking the milk from it, you're not going to be chayav kares for eating pigul. The naisar, or also in the case of naisar or tamei, if you're tumas agof, you won't be chayav kares for eating these parts of the animal because it's not, in the lashon of Rashi, it's not gufa de zivcha. It's not considered to be from the body of the animal itself, or the bird itself. Okay, the Gemara begins with a statement from Rabbi Lazar, which eventually the Gemara is going to bring a raya from our Mishnah to the Chiddush, to the halacha that Rabbi Lazar says. So the Gemara, Rabbi Lazar said as follows: Pigel bezevach, if a person thought that he's shechting, for example, almanas, to eat, or to burn on the mizbeach, chutz l'zmanai. So he was mefagel, a proper machshava that is mefagel the carbon. So now nispagel hashlil, the fetus that's in the animal becomes a status of pigul as well. Okay? In other words, because he did have the proper machshava of pigul regarding something which is the body of the animal, and it's usually it's the derech to eat it. So once the animal becomes properly pigul, so now the shlil, the fetus, also becomes pigul. However, bishlil, if his whole machshava when he thought to eat chutz l'zmanai was that what is he going to eat chutz l'zmanai? Only the shlil, the fetus, then lo nispagal hazevach. Then the whole pigul does not take effect. Okay, because the reason here is that the shlil is not something which is the derech to eat. And therefore, if you have the machshavit only on the shlil itself, on the fetus, that is ginit chuslas manoi, the pickle doesn't take effect. But on the other hand, though, what Rabbi Loz is being lechadish is the shlil is considered to be gufa de zivcha. It is considered to be part of the body of the animal. So once you did have the proper machshava of pigul regarding the animal itself, that psul of pigul, the status of pigul, does take effect on the entire animal, including the shlil. It's also part of the animal. Okay, this is actually different than the way Rashi explained it in the Mishnah. We'll see the Gemara in the Maskana is going to point out that this is the pshat in the Mishnah. So again, so the point of his chiddush is that the shlil cannot be mefagel. It can't cause pigul if your machshava was just about the shlil, but it could be mispagel. Once the zebach becomes pigul, then the shlil becomes pigul included with it. This is one example. Now he gives another two examples as well. The alal, if it's regarding a bird, that a person is doing the malike and he has the machshava of pigul, and his machshava was regarding the olol, which is a tendon in the neck, that by a bird it's actually soft and it's roy to eat. So that machshava of pigul regarding this part of the bird is a proper machshava of pigul. So then, since he had a proper machshava of pigul for a part of the bird that's edible completely and it's the derech to eat, nispagla mura, the mura, which is the crop, also becomes included in the pigul, even though the crop itself is not something which people usually eat. However, the other way around, if his machshava was b'mura, he's only thinking that he's going to eat this mura out of its place or out of its time, then lo nispagel olol. Then the olol, which is the other parts of the bird that are roy to eat, will not become pigul. A third example for this is, and here, this case is speaking about the parim hanisrafim. Parim hanisrafim are certain karbanis chatos that you are makriv some parts in the mizbeach, and then the basar you don't eat from it. It's taken out of the machna and has to be completely burnt. So there's really no part of it that you eat at all. So pigul be'emurin. So over here, if the machshava was that regarding the parts that are you makter on the mizbeach, that he will eat it, that he will be makter on the mizbeach out of its time. So that's a proper machshava of pigul. So nispaglu parim. So then the other part of this cow, which is the flesh that's usually burnt outside the machna, it all becomes in the status of pigul, that if you eat from any of it, you're going to be chayiv kares. However, the other way around, the parim, if the person is thinking that he's going to eat from the parim, he's going to eat from the meat of the parim out of the time, so then that's not a machshava of pigul, because this is not something that's meant to be eaten. This is something that's meant to be burnt. Okay, so therefore, in such a case, lo nispagle emurim. So then, the emurim, the parts of the animal that you burn in the mizbeach, will not become pigul. It's the same kind, the same point. By the parim, the basar is usually burnt. So if your machshava is regarding the basar that's burnt, so that does not cause pigul. It's not mefagel, since that's not something that you usually eat. You burn it. Mashenken, if you think the machshava of pigul regarding the emurim, that's a regular machshava of pigul. And then the basar of this parim is mispagel. It becomes pigul because once you had the proper machshava of pigul regarding the emurim, so then the basar also becomes pigul.
And there's chorus also.
Yeah, there's chorus if you can eat from it. Right. Yeah. That's
this, right?
That's what we're talking. This
so
is what it is.
You're only burning what? The whole thing you burn.
You burn the whole thing. Well, no, there are some parts that you makter on the mizbeach. Rashi here brings the kloyos, the seres hakaveh. There are certain parts that you do burn on the mizbeach. But then besides that,
but nothing's eaten.
No, correct. Nothing is eaten.
Separate things.
So since in this kind of a cover nothing's eaten.
Yeah. But there's still achilas mizbeach. There's still what's called achilas mizbeach, which is the emurim which you burn in the mizbeach. So therefore, the halacha of pigul still could apply. If you had the machshava to eat chutz l'zmanei regarding the emurim, which is burnt in the mizbeach, then the other parts which you burn will become pigul. If someone goes and eats it, though, if someone will go ahead and eat it after he had this machshava,
is he allowed to eat it?
No, for sure not allowed to eat it. It becomes it's not meant to be eaten. Now that it's pigul, it's kares if you eat it. That's the
something that shows ain't dark lethal. I mean, it's not supposed to be eaten. It's not supposed to be eaten. What's the difference? It's not supposed to eat because you can't eat it, or because the Torah says it's not.
It's just telling you that the pigul takes effect. That'll be chayiv kares. It's telling you that now if he goes ahead and eats it, the pigul will take effect, that it's chayav kares. But the other way around, if his whole machshava was regarding this basar that you burn outside the machna and it's not meant to eat at all, that can't cause pigul. It's not mefagel, but it becomes pigul if you thought it regarding the emurim. That's the concept of Rabbi Lazar. Okay, so now the Gemara is going to try to bring rayas from different places, from different prices, and eventually the Gemara is going to come back to our Mishnah and prove what Rabbi Elazar said from our Mishnah. So the Gemara shall we say we could bring a raya for what Rabbi Elazar says from the following brisa or Mishnah. This is later here in the Masechta, where there's a machlokes between Rab Shimon and the Chachamim, whether there's bechlal the concept of pigul by the param and israfim. According to Rab Shimon, there is no pigul by param and israfim that we're talking about here, but the ones that are burnt, because pigul in the pasuk it says in the lashon of Zevochim. Shlamim is a carbon where there's achila for the mizbeach, and the person can eat from it also, the kohanim can eat from it, but not param and israfim, which you can't eat from it at all. That's Rab Shimon's opinion. And Rab Chachamim disagree with that. Now that the Mishnah there says, V'shavim, they both agree, She'im chishev ba'chilas parim, that if his machshava was to eat from the parim, that he's going to eat it out of its place, out of its time, or b'sreifasa, he's going to burn it out of its place or out of its time. Lo yasav v'lo klum. Then over here, for sure, it's not going to be considered pigul. Regarding the achila, it's not pigul, because there is no achila. Even Rab Shimon that says, or the Chachamim that say that it is pigul, when is it going to be pigul? As I mentioned before, that's regarding the emurim, the parts that you burn on the mizbeach. Over there, the pigul will apply. But if he's thinking that he's going to eat from these param and esrafim out of its time, it's not meant to eat. There's no part of the param and esrafim that you eat b'chlal. So it's not the derech to eat it. And the same thing also regarding burning. If he thinks that he's going to burn it out of its place or out of its time, burning, there's no din of pigul regarding burning. There's a din of pigul only regarding achila. Rashi here actually says that we did have earlier in the previous Perek that even regarding Sreife, there is a concept of achila. It depends with what lashon he thinks. If he thinks that he's going to burn it out of its place or out of its time, then there's no pigul. But if he thinks that he's going to eat it through burning out of its place, there is a concept of pigul as well. Okay, so that's what it says there. There's no pigul. So not my love, don't you think it could be medayik from that Mishnah? But regarding the param and israfim, and his machshava of pigul was regarding the emurim, the parts that you burn on the mizbeach. What happens then? Then the pigul takes effect, and then the spaglu parim. Then the entire par, the entire cow, including the basar that's burnt mechutz lamachne, also becomes pigul. This is the point that Rabbi Elazar said, that once the pigul takes effect because you thought it regarding the emurim that you burn in the mizbeach, then even regarding the other parts of the basar, where there is no din that it could cause pigul. But then once the pigul takes effect, it will be mispagel. The pigul takes effect on the entire part, including the part that's burnt outside. That's what it seems you could be medayik from that Mishnah. But the Gemara says, like, not necessarily should you be medayik this way. Rather be medayik as follows. Ha chishev be'emurim. If the machshava was regarding the parts that are burnt on the mizbeach, then ispaglu emurim atzmam. Then only those emurim. That's where the pigul takes effect. Rashi says the emurim is the yiseres hakovid v'akloya, is the parts that you burn on the mizbeach, but the rest of the meat of the carbon, the pigul will not take effect. So there's no proof to Rabbi Elazar's chiddush. Tashema, the Gemara tries to bring a raya from another Mishnah that is in Masechta Me'ila. It says as follows: Parim an Israfim, Usirim an Israfim. So both the parim and there's also goats where the halacha is that it's completely burnt. You don't eat from it at all. Ma'ilim behem, the din of Me'ila applies to them, mishahuktishu, from the moment that they were sanctified to be hektish. And then nishchatu, once it was shechted, huchsharu, it now becomes prepared, pasul b'tful yaim, that it will become pasul even a person that's just at full yaim, meaning he already went to the mikveh, but he didn't wait until at night, or of mechusik kipurim, regarding certain individuals, azav, a mitzayre, that still has to bring a carbon. So if they touch this, it'll pasul the carbon. Okay, and then additionally, ubelino, and also if it stayed overnight, it wasn't brought. It wasn't done on that day, then it'll become pasul. This is halacha b'chlal regarding karbanis, that if it stays overnight, it becomes pasul. So the Gemara says, what does this mean? What stayed overnight? My love, don't you think this means linas basar, that if the basar of these param and israfim and sirim and israfim that have to be burnt mechutz lamachne, they are left overnight, the halacha of being left overnight that pasals will apply to them, and it'll become pasul. Which means not only the parts that are burnt on the mizbeach, but even regarding the basar, if it's left overnight, the Mishnah there is saying lina, it applies to that also, and it becomes the whole carbon becomes pasul. Says the Gemara, so Shma Mina, I can learn from here, Migu de Pasla Belina, just like I see that if regarding the basar of this carbon, that if it's left overnight, it becomes pasla b'machshava. It would be logical to compare and say similar regarding the machshava that it'll passel this also. If you had a machshava of pigul regarding the emurim, which is a proper machshava of pigul, it'll passel also the basar as well. The reason the Gemara is making this comparison is, as Mefarshim explained, is because the point that is behind Rabbi Elazar's chiddush is that even these parts of the animal that is not the derech of a person to eat, and therefore if you think regarding them that you're going to eat it chutz l'zmana, it will not become pigul, but it's still part of the guf of the animal. It is guf of the zivcha. So because it is part of the animal, once pigul takes effect through a proper machshava of pigul, the psul of pigul will include even these parts of the animal. So in this case, the basar is part of the animal regarding the halacha of lina. So it's logical that it should also be part of the body of the animal regarding the din of pigul to take effect on this as well. So the Gemara says, loy, not necessarily is that the pshat of that Mishnah there. Linas emurim. When it says there that the paraman is rafim, siraman is rafim, there's a psul of it staying overnight. What does it mean? What are you going to leave overnight? It's not talking about leaving the basar that's supposed to be burnt overnight. It means the parts that are supposed to be burnt on the mizbeach. That was left overnight, and that's where the psul of lina will apply, but not regarding the basar. We could still say that the basar is like not part of the carbon. It's not part of the animal, and therefore the psul of lina will not take effect, and the psul of pigul will not take effect on this either. In fact, the Gemara Barhamidik Tani Sefer, it says there in the Sefer that kulon ma'ilim be'en al beis hadeshen, all the meat that you take out from the paraman esrafim and siraman esrafim to burn, there will still be me'ila if you have any anah from it ad sheyutach habasar. You have to allow it to burn to the point that it melts or it becomes completely like ashes or coal. Until that point, it's still somewhat basar, so there will still be the halacha of me'ilah. So in the Sefer, it's clearly speaking about the meat, the basar that's being burnt outside. It's not talking about the emurim. If so, says the Gemara in the Klal, the reisha linas basar. It would seem that in the reisha, it's also talking about the basar that's being left overnight. And therefore, we should still prove that the machshava of pigul affects the basar as well. Says the Gemara, there's no proof from the Sefer. Midi area, is it a comparison? Ha-kedisa, and the-ha-kedisa. Each case of the Mishnah is addressing a different point, and therefore it's talking about different parts of the animal. Reisha emurim, and the Reisha, when it speaks about lina, that applies only to the emurim that are burnt in the mizbeach, and the Sefer basar. And the Sefer, it's speaking about the din of me'ilah, regarding what's burnt outside the machne. There it's speaking about the basar. It's two different points. So there's no raya from that Mishnah as well. Meisev Rabba asks on the halacha that Rabbi Elazar said. It says in the Braisa as follows: Ve'elu she'ein mefaglin, ve'ein mispaglin. The following, there is no din of pigul. They don't cause pigul, and they don't become puzzle through any pigul. What are they? Tzemeh shebarashi kvasim, the wool that's on the lambs, visar shebezakim tyoshim, or the beard of the goat, v'ha'or, the hide, v'ha'reitiv, and the gravy, v'ha'kifa, and as I mentioned, kifa is in the Mishnah, the spices with some pieces of the basar that's also not the derech to eat, v'ha'elol, and the elol, which was, I think that was a tendon in the neck of the animal, which is tough and you don't eat it, v'ha'mura, and the mura, which by the bird, it's the crop, v'ha'atzama, the bones, v'ha'gidin, and tendons, v'ha'karnaim, and the horns, v'hatlafayim, the hooves, v'ha'shlil, and a fetus, v'hashilya, and the placenta, v'cholav v'mukdashim, and the milk of the animals that are a carbon. This is a nekeva, or beitzei teirin, or the eggs of the birds. Kulan, all of these cases, most of them were mentioned in the Mishnah, loy mefaglin, not they will cause pigul, which means if you think about them, not they will cause pigul, if you think to eat them out of the time, and v'loy mispaglin, they don't become pigul. Ve'ein chayavin aleya mishum pigul naisar v'tamei. You're not going to be chayiv koris if you eat from it, not for the isser of pigul, not for the isser of naisar or tamei. And v'hamayla behem b'chutz. If you are makriv any of these outside of the Beis Hamikdash, which is another case that you would be chayiv koris, the halacha of shchute chutz, you shecht outside, or you do any of the ketara, you burn outside the Beis Hamikdash. But of these parts, if you bring it outside the Beis Hamikdash, pater.
Why is that?
You'll be pater. Because it's not something that's made to be burnt on the Mizbeach. You only chayiv what you do outside if it's similar to what's done inside the Beis Hamikdash. That's the Braisa. Says the Gemara, it seems to be pretty clear, not like what Rabbi Elazar said. My love, don't you think? What is it saying here? Loi mifaglin hazevach. That if a person has a machshove, let's take one example of the list that it says here, that he's going to eat the fetus, the shlil, outside of its time. So that will not cause pigul to the whole carbon. And same also on the opposite. And when it says v'loi mispaglin, what does v'loi mispaglin means? That it cannot become puzzle because of pigul, machma zevach. That means also in a case where he thought regarding the carbon itself that I'm going to eat a part of the carbon out of its time with a proper machshava of pigul, but that psul of pigul does not take effect on a shlil, on a fetus. That's what v'loi mispaglin means. So therefore I see, not like Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar says it cannot cause pigul because it's not the derech to eat it. But if you did have a proper machshava of pigul, it is gufa de zivcha, it's part of the animal, and it will become pigul. Says the Gemara, loy, that's not the pshat over here. Loy mifaglin es hazevach. If you had a machshava to eat any of these, for example, the shlil, out of its time, it will not cause pigul to the whole carbon. But also, when it says v'loy mispaglin, what it means is v'loy mispaglin machmas atzman. Only if you thought a machshava that I will eat this shlil out of its time, it's saying that the shlil itself will not become pigul. The mispaglin is not in the case where he actually had a proper machshava of pigul for the zevach itself, for the animal itself, where it's something that's roy to eat. Mispaglin means also in a case where he was thinking regarding this shlil itself. That's what it's talking about. Not it will cause pigul for the rest of the animal, and not even for itself. It also will not become pigul. But if that's the pshat here, hadiktani seife. It says again in the seife, kulon loy mefaglin v'loy mispaglin. It repeats this language again. If you look again in the Braise, right? It started off ve'elu she'ein mefaglin ve'ein mispaglin, and again it says the whole list. And then it concludes and says again that kulon loy mefaglin v'loy mispaglin. Why does it repeat that again? Hasulamali. Why is it saying this expression again? So the Gemara understands the Braisa is saying it a second time to clarify that it's not only regarding when the machshava was just for this shlil. Even if the machshava was a proper machshava of pigul, regarding the zevach, something that's roy to eat, still loy mispaglin, that pigul that will not take effect on all of these that are not roy usually to eat. That's what it seems like the repetition in the Braisa is coming to tell you. So the Gemara says, you're being medayik this only because of the repetition in the lashon of the Braisa. Ein chayav and olive mishum pigul. When it goes on to say that you won't be chayav kares if you eat from it for pigul, hasulamali. Why does it have to repeat that again? It just said loy mefaglin for loy mispaglin. So obviously, if you eat from it, you won't be chayav kares for pigul. Why does it say it again? Because it wanted to say that if you eat from it, you're not going to be chayav kares for the halacha of noiser or tamei. So tani pigul. It repeats again regarding pigul that there won't be kares. So hachanami. So therefore, here I could say as well, aidi the boyle misni, because the Tana wanted to say the halacha that amayla mehen bachutz, that if you shech from this or you do the avodah, or you burn any of these outside of the Beis Hamikdash, that you won't be chayav kares. So Tananami v'kol alei mefaglin v'lei mispaglin. He repeated it again, sort of as a lead-in to the additional detail that he adds regarding not burning it outside the Beis Hamikdash. So therefore, there's no raya from the lashon of this Braisa as well. Rava Omar, but now Rava comes and says, or the other gears here is Omar Rava, because it's not like an argument here. Rava says that Afanan Nami Tanina, that I'll bring you a raya from what it said in our Mishnah. What did it say in the Mishnah? Hashechet esamukdoshin, you shechted an animal, and what was the machshava? Lechol shlil oishalye b'chutz, that you're going to eat the fetus or the placenta outside. So that's not something which is the derech to eat. So loy pigul, it does not cause any pigul. Then the next case, the Mishnah goes on to say, if a person is doing the malike by the birds, he's going to eat the egg outside its place, loy pigul. That doesn't cause a psul either. Now, the hadatani, then there's another case where the Mishnah goes on to say, cholav hamukdashim, that is, or beitzei teirim, the milk, or the eggs, the milk from the animals, or the eggs from the birds, ein chayev aleya mishum pigul noisav v'tameh. Here it says, specifically regarding the milk and regarding the eggs, that if you eat from it, you won't chayiv, not kares, not for pigul, noiser or tameh. Okay, so now, in the last case in the Mishnah, when it's talking about eating from it, that you won't be chayiv kodis for pigul, it only says what? Milk and the eggs. Ha shlil v'shalye chayavin. But so therefore it seems that if it would be though that your machshava was for a pigul, a proper machshava of pigul on the animal, for something that's right to eat, it became pigul. So now the shlil and the shalye, the fetus and the placenta, will be affected by that pigul as well. And you will be chayiv for this. That's what you see over here. Right? So on one hand, it's saying at the beginning of the Mishnah that for the shlil and the shalye, there's no pigul. But then it goes on to say in the end of the Mishnah, regarding the milk and the eggs, there's no pigul. Why is it saying only regarding the milk and the eggs? What happened to the shlil and the shalye? So Elamai, the answer is Elalav Shmami. No, the difference over here is Kan Machmas Zevach. If you had a machshava, a proper machshava of pigul on the carbon itself, for something that's right to eat, so then that machshava of pigul takes effect, and it actually does affect the shlal and the shilya as well. Like Rabbi Loza said, because the fetus and the placenta are considered to be part of the body of the animal. It's not something which is usually the derech to eat. So therefore, it won't be mifagel. If you think about them that you're going to eat it out of its time, it won't be mifagel, but it will be mispagel. Why? Because it is something which is considered to be part of the body of the animal. And ka machmas atzmam, when the Mishnah said before, and also in the Braisa before, when it said that there's no pigel for the shlal and the shilya, and the other list that we had before in the Braisa, what does that mean? Regarding this itself, if your machshava was only that I'm going to eat the shlal or the shilya out of its time, here I say that the pigul does not take effect. So here, from the way the Mishnah divides it, I see the point that Rabbi Loza said, Shema Mina, this is a proof for the point that Rabbi Loza said.
Cholav and beitzim.
Yeah, cholav and beitzim is different. Yeah, exactly. Cholav, milk and eggs is mamish, not considered to be part of the body of the animal. Even if the whole animal becomes properly pigul, it will not affect the milk or the eggs, because that's taken not part of the body of the animal at all, or the bird. Tanan Hasam. The Gemara brings up here a whole different subject, but there will be a certain detail of a Braisa that I mentioned before that it will ask a question from or bring a raya from, so therefore brings it here. So we learned over there in the Mishnah, this is later in the Masechta, it says Ubale Mumin. Okay, what this is talking about is, we had this mentioned before also the Masechta, that when you bring a pasal of carbon on the Mizbeach, b'diyeved, once it's brought into the Mizbeach, you leave it on the Mizbeach. Once it's brought on the Mizbeach, b'diyavad, you leave it on the Mizbeach. That's the general concept. But now there's exceptions to this. Certain cases of psulin, where it was something that was lachatchila completely pasul, then if it was brought on the Mizbeach, you take it off. You don't leave it there. Now, Bali Mumin, when it comes to Bali Mumin, this is an animal that has a mum. Okay, so seemingly this is something that was lachatchila, bal mum, and it was still brought as a carbon. Rabbi Kiva machshir bebali mumin. Rabbi Kiva is machshir, he says, b'diyevet, if it was brought on the Mizbeach, so you leave it on the Mizbeach. That's a chiddush of Rabbi Kiva. So on this, Amar Rabbi Chiya bar Abba, Amar Rabbi Yechanan, lahichshir Rabbi Kiva, when did Rabbi Kiva say that if the animal was a bal mum, and it was brought on the Mizbeach b'diyevet, so then it's kosher, you leave it there. When is this? Ela bedukin sheba'ayin. What kind of a mum is this? If the eye has a cataract, or a similar kind of mum to this, which is hoyel uksherim ba'oifis, since this kind of mum by a bird the bird is still kosher, that's the kind of mum that I say that if it's brought on the Mizbeach, but the Yavad, you leave it there. By a bird, the halacha basically is, it's not only this dukin shabayin, it's an example. Most of the mummin that there is by a behemoth do not apply by the bird. The only mum that applies by a bird is if it's a chasa ever. Okay, so therefore, these kinds of mummin, which by a bird is not a problem, then I say that if it was brought on the Mizbeach by a behemoth, b'di'evet, Rabbi Kiva is saying it can be kept on the Mizbeach.
So why did they sacrifice that bull, whatever, in Kamsa Bar Kamsa?
That was the Chatchila. That was the Chatchila. It was before the fact. Right? It was before the fact. Now, Vahu, another limitation to what Rabbi Kiva said. Vahu shekada megdesha nesmumam. It also has to be a case where he was makdish the animal, and there was a time where the animal was fit to be brought as a carbon, and only afterwards there was a mum. That's the halacha that Rabbi Chiya bar Abba said, the name of Rabbi Yechanan, to explain what Rabbi Kiva holds. Okay, another detail. Amar Rabbi Chiya bar Abba, and one gersa here. Umayde Rabbi Kiva will agree, but Eilas nekeva, that if you are makdish a carbon oila from an nekeva, So then the command, the kodam mumalek deshadami. That's considered to be a case where the mum is there before you amakdish it, because the ayla is not brought from an akeva. An ayla is brought from a zachar. So if you're makdish an ayla, which is an akeva, so then it's not l'chatchila fit to be as a carbon. It's not the right carbon, and the cave is not. So therefore, it's like a behemoth that had its mum from before, and if it was b'diavad brought into the mizbech to be burnt, you have to take it down. Most of Rab Zayda. So now on this last point, Rab Zayda asks on this, one of the details that it said before in the Braise was Hamayle mehen bachutz. If you bring from them outside of the Beis Hamikdash, right? So in the Mishnah, or in the Braise rather, there was a whole list of things. And one of the things that are mentioned over there was, there's the shalya, there's the shlil, so we're talking about an akeva animal, and there's a fetus, there's a placenta. If you burn this outside the Beis Hamikdash, pater. You'll be pater.
How is that?
That's what it said, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so now, what could you be medayik from this? Me iman. That's only if you bring from them, meaning from the shlil and the shalya. Then, if it's going to be brought outside the Beis Hamikdash, it'll be pater. But me iman chayiv. That means that if you burn outside of the Beis Hamikdash by a carbon oila, which is meant to be burnt, and instead of burning it inside the Beis Hamikdash, it was burnt outside, the mother was burnt outside, chayiv, you would be chayiv. It's because it says only the shlal and the shilya from this nekeva will be potted if you burn it outside. But if you took the mother itself and burnt it outside, you would be chayiv. So now, what are we talking about? What are we talking about over here? But oilas nekeva. So we're talking about a carbon oila, which is a nekeva. Okay, so Rashi says, because by a shlomim, if you burn it outside of the Beis Hamikdash, you burn the basar outside the Beis Hamikdash, you're going to be potter, because it's not the way it's done inside the Beis Hamikdash. But by the carbon oila, which you burn in the Mizbeach inside the Beis Hamikdash, then if you burn it outside, the way it's done inside, for that, you would be chayiv. So over here, when it says regarding the shlil and the shalya, that if you burn that outside the Beis Hamikdash, you'll be potter, is because that's not burnt inside the Beis Hamikdash. But if from the basar of the mother itself, so then you would be chayiv. That's what it's mashma from this from this brisa. So we're talking over here about a carbon oila, which is in a keva. Has to be in a cave. It has a fetus and a placenta. So says the Gemara, if so, why would you be chayiv? Again, the rule is you only chayiv for burning it outside if you did it the same way inside in the Beis Hamikdash, it would be accepted to be burnt. So therefore says the Gemara, so we're talking about a oila which is in a keva. Now, if you're going to say that Rabbi Akiva's opinion is that a carbon oila that you are makdish in a keva, even though oila is usually not in a keva. But if you're going to say that Rabbi Akiva holds that even an oil of an akeva, im also letated, once it was brought on the mizbeach, you don't take it out. So I can say, oh, mani Rabbi Akiva. So this braise here is going according to Rabbi Akiva. But Ele Yamrit im also tated. But if you're going to say that even Rabbi Akiva agrees that oil on a keva, it's never burnt on the mizbeach, and even with the yeved, you have to take it off of the mizbeach. So hamani. According to who is this braise over here saying that the shlal and the shilya that you burn outside, you'll be potter? But it's mashma, but the mother, the basar, it's mashma that the basar of the mother is similar to the shlal and the shilya. The mother, the basar, will be chayiv for this. Why would you be chayiv? Says the Gemara, no, you have to be medayik differently. That the diak from what it says in the Braise, Shlal and Shilya is Hamayla mehem b'chutz potter. If you burn the fetus or the placenta outside, you'd be potter. But me'emurei iman chayev. Only the emurim. Don't be medayik that from the basar, then you'll be chayev if you burn it outside. We're not talking about the basar. We're talking about the emurim of the mother. Then you would be chayev. But we're not. So it's not talking about an akeva. It's talking about from the emurim. That's what we're talking about, that you would be chayiv. So I could be talking about it. Again? That's the diuk here. The Gemara is changing the diuk. Until here, the Gemara was assuming, and we'll see in a moment why the Gemara was assuming this. The Gemara was assuming that we're talking about the basar. The basar of the mother, if you're makdir outside, you would be chayiv. And therefore the Gemara, based on that, said that it must be talking about a oila. Because only by a oila do you burn the basar. By a shlamim, by a chatos, you don't burn the basar. So now the Gemara is switching the diuk. The Gemara is saying, no, the diuk is not regarding the basar. The shlal and the shilya, you potter. But if the emurim, the sacrificial parts, if that was burnt outside, then you would be chayiv, and therefore you can be talking about a shlomim or chatas. But it says that if you burn from them, from the fetus or the placenta outside, then you'll be pater, and therefore the diok of the iman, that if it's the mother, you would be chayiv. So the iman dum yedidhu. So the lashon of mehen is mashma that, but if it's from a part of the animal of the mother, which is similar to the shlal and the shilya, just like the shlal and the shilya is the basar of the animal. That's not the emurim that you bring on the mizbeach. So it's mashma that by the mother, even from the basar, if you burn it outside, you would be chayiv. So therefore the Gemara says you have to change the lashon of the brayse. Ela ema, reading the lashon of the brayse, hamayla me'emu reim bachutz potter. If you're going to be maila from the emurim of the shlal and the shilya, we're not talking about the shlal and the shilya itself. We're not talking about the fetus itself or the placenta itself. We're talking about in that fetus there is the seres hakaved and the kloyos, those sacrificial parts. If you're makter that outside the Beis Hamikdash, you'll be potter. Ha me'emurei iman, and then you medayik. But if it's from the sacrificial parts of the mother, then you'll be chayiv. So again, the point is, it's not talking about a oila, which has to be in the keva, then we run into a problem. A oila in the keva is never brought in the mizbeach. We're talking about a chatos or a shlomim, which is burnt on the mizbeach, and then if you burn it outside, you'd be chayiv.